Hello and welcome to another episode of the Modern Practical Guide to a Positive Full Life Now, aka The Selfish Guide, with your host, me, your go-to friend. Today we have a special episode with a very good friend of mine, Rohan. We're going to be talking about the money video, and he's going to have some questions for me. So without further ado, Rohan, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Carlos. Appreciate it, buddy. I'm Rohan. I'm Carlos's friend. I've known him since 2013, 2014. So been a while. I myself am a cybersecurity professional by trade, I guess. My education has been in international politics, I guess, which is why I watched the money video and had a whole bunch of questions for this guy. So let's dive right into it, Carlos. So I saw your video and there were some things that resonated with me. Some things didn't really make a lot of sense. So I thought we'll get some clarification. The most fascinating concept that I thought you had was one about a financial mentor concept.
Mm.
I've heard about career mentors left, right, and center my whole life. I've never really heard a financial mentor. I mean, yeah, there are people you look up to, like, and everybody's like, oh, I want to be like Bill Gates or I want to be like Warren Buffett. That doesn't really strike to me as a financial mentor because you don't actually interact with these guys, right? You just so I thought it was a very interesting concept. You want to maybe elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something I thought of personally because I struggle with trying to figure out what to do with my career at different points in my life, and mentors really help because you get to follow them, you get to shadow them. And then I started thinking, money is one of these topics in life that we don't talk about enough, right? We don't talk about our friends, we don't know about money with our colleagues, and this is a
Even in
way
an
to.
Indian house, like in an Indian household, we always talk about money. It's like,
Really? Well, that's really good to hear, actually. Because I think that it's like anything in life. If you talk about it, you're going to have a better understanding of it. You're going to know what other people's perspective are. And what I feel a financial mentor helps with is being able to find an outlet to converse about money. And having a financial mentor is just one, to find it. You're going to have to go and talk to people and be like, hey, who do I want to emulate? And a lot of times you're going to find, hey, I don't know what this person's financials are, and I feel awkward asking about it. So you're going to have to think about, hey, how can I bring this up and try to make it, something in friendly conversation. You're like, how do you feel about this, and how do you feel about that? And the great thing about that is you're going to raise more awareness in your circle of your community. And at the same time, you're going to figure out, hey, this guy really knows a lot. This guy seems to have it really going on in the sense of, or this, person. And so you're gonna be like, hey, do you mind if we, meet up once a week or once a month even, and just chat about, finances and try to figure out, help me out. And the funny thing is, I've had people ask me that, and it's always flattering. It's always nice. But more than anything is that person is one, not afraid to grow and just brave to be able to ask it, especially in today's environment that we live in, where money, at least in my experience, is a bit taboo to talk about. And so if you have a financial mentor, you're going to have the repetition and the advantage like someone would in a career mentor. But at the same time, you're going to be able to gain a perspective on someone else's finances, and ideally that motivates you to do things in your life. Because a lot of times when you read
yep.
about Warren Buffett doing something, you're just like, oh, but that guy's a genius. He's special. He's lucky, or whatever you want, right?
Eh,
But if you like talking about, Matt, or you're talking about Barbara, then your friend you've known for a decade, then you're like, wow, if she can do it, if he can do it, then I can do it. And so it's very empowering in that sense.
and this leads me to a follow-up, actually,
Mhm.
Carlos, because there's of course a sense of wariness around this, right? So oftentimes my fear would be, if you approach, like, if you know your friend, you tend to fall for the wrong type of financial mentor, right? Maybe you
Mhm.
go for the guy with the, oh, I want to be like person X because person X has a massive house on the beach, got a
Mhm.
boat. Maybe he runs a Ponzi scheme. I mean, you don't know that. Like, maybe he makes it look like he's above board, but he's not. So how do you pick up on that? What if you end up with a wrong financial mentor who ends up teaching you all the wrong things? Wolf of Wall Street style. What would you
Uh,
do?
that is definitely a risk. But what I'll say is that if you're talking more about money with your community, then you're going to be able to sniff out things like this, because you're in in talking to someone. I don't know about you, when you talk to someone about something and it really interests you, after the conversation, you go look it up yourself. You further, research the subject because it truly interests you. It'll be the same thing with money. And again, If someone is not above board, as you say, you're going to be able to see it in, your questions and the back and forth. Are they really in debt? You know what I mean? And how are their perspective on debt? And and the other thing is, look, some people,
Interesting that you mentioned about debt. I'll revisit that. Finish your
some
thought.
people have a very laissez-faire type understanding with debt, and it works for them. But the great thing about this is the more you talk about it, the more you're going to realize where you're comfortable with the risk and where you're comfortable with the debt. And so, again, a financial mentor is just, a direction. But really, what you're doing in trying to find your financial mentor and actually conversing with financial mentor is getting an understanding, conversing about it, and getting a feel for money. The other thing is, you might realize, hey, this is not the person I thought they were in the sense of the finances, and so that's not, or that's something I don't feel comfortable trying to take that risk, so it doesn't make sense for me, and you can pursue other avenues. The other thing I will say in reference to financial mentor is, don't be intimidated, right? If you're, a lot of times you're like, oh, my friend's super wealthy, you couldn't imagine, being on the level of investment. And I would say you'd be surprised when you talk to a lot of people who are actually financially savvy and sound in their in their investments. They started somewhere, and they're going to completely relate, assuming they didn't inherit it, of course. But they're going to relate to you, and they're going to be able to converse with you at your level, and help you come up. It's kind of like the gym. I don't know if you've ever talked to people who are like bodybuilders, but
I have.
whenever you talk to them, they all start somewhere. And when you walk in, this puny guy who wants to get into bodybuilding, if you just start talking to them and asking or figuring stuff out, they're very, very open. They're just like, yeah, I started, because they remember being in a position. The same thing with a financial mentor. They're going to be open usually. I mean, there are exceptions, and they're going to want to help you because they're going to see themselves in you, and they're going to hopefully give you better advice
Yeah.
than they did, so you don't fall into the same pitfalls that they
I mean, there's a inherent assumption here that you already have a relationship with said person. There's some level of trust there. And of course, now we're going to make an assumption that you've already weeded out the fraudsters from the genuine people want to give it. I mean, like, we got to make some base assumptions over here. Now, what would you say if, for instance, you're just a young college grad out, your family didn't come from money. Like, you don't actually know a lot of well-off people who could be a financial mentor for you, and the ones who are well off have scandalous stories surrounding them. Let's just, to say the least. And this is true story. Like, this is kind of partially related to my family. Like, we didn't really, like, my parents were not well off financially. Like, their parents weren't. They weren't happening in it at all. This is in India, so it's like they were the first generation to do well, right? And now, of course, like, it's up to us. Like, sure, I met people who are financially well off, and I've sort of became good at managing money, partly because I have a whole bunch of debt. That's another story. But again, that's my own doing, and I'm dealing with it just fine. But the question is, how would someone who doesn't have access to someone who has investments, who can advise them on 401k? Like, I mean, I know you and I, back even when I met you in Nairobi, you were the first person to tell me, oh yeah, like, I have a 401k. I'm like, what the heck? Like, this dude, like, why is he gonna? And that made sense. Like, obviously I didn't have access to it, so I couldn't do it. And of course, the first possible moment I started doing it because I remembered having that conversation with you. I mean, I guess, in a sense, it made sense to me. But of course, not everybody is going to have that kind of access. So if someone, for instance, maybe somewhere here's the idea of financial mentor, but they don't have a network that they can rely on, or maybe they are in a network where everybody else is doing just as badly as they are, what do they do?
It's a very good question, and there's no easy answer to that. Sometimes, and there's a reason why the wealthy have wealthy children, not just because they inherit
Yeah.
it, it's because they, Bill Gates, all these people, they're very smart and they're very into their work and they love what they do, but they all had financial help from usually someone in their family to get started. And so you could have the best idea in the world and have a dedication to genius, but if no one's willing to back you financially, you're never going to have the opportunity. And I think that's them. That same thing is there. To that, I will say that it sucks, and you definitely start the race in the back and talking from my point of view, being a minority, being inner city, and being relatively poor, it sucks. And you're in a race, and you're like, you start, 20 minutes after everyone else has started, and it sucks. And I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It's hard, and it's going to be harder for you, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. It means you just have to bootstrap yourself and go out and pursue them. Like for me, for example, with career mentors, I didn't have a good career mentor to look up to or even find. So, it was as simple as picking up the yellow pages back when I was young. It was a directory, and I would just be like, I wanted to be a doctor when I was younger. And I just called up
Whoa.
doctors and it's that simple. And just be like, hey, you know, I was reading about you and it seems like you have a very good business. Would you mind if I shadowed you for a little bit? I think I want to be a doctor and it'd be really nice to have someone, to follow and look up to and help, and ideally me, in pursuing that thing. And so you can do it. You just have to. It's a lot more work. It's a lot scarier, but there's different avenues. But in the beginning, I will say figure out what you want, and this goes to everything. I would say don't like if you're going to make investments, great. But for me, for example, I have investments, but then I invest in things that get me excited. That I want to be invested in. It's not a lot. It's a small portion, but I have things that in AI, quantum computing and stuff like that, which is just something that interests me. It gets me to read stuff, and then I'm like, "Ooh, this company looks like it's really good, or this project looks like it's good." And you invest a little money. I'm talking about very little, but that gets me excited, right? I have these maybe sound, assets that are giving me dividends and creating, wealth, right? But figure out what gets you excited in the morning. And again, don't put all your eggs in that basket, but if
Of
you have
course.
that little
Yeah.
bit, that's going to motivate you. So when you have no one to look up to, try to think of creative ways to find someone. And then after, like I said, focus on those aspects. The main thing you have to know is you want to create assets that make you money, and then you don't want to eat those assets, and try to only get debt when you have no other choice, and then when you do get debt, try to get debt that's better than the rate you could be getting money for. And what I mean by that is if you have $1,000, right, and you can invest it, or you can get more debt, right, the way it would work in reference to money, like this imaginary $1,000, is pretend you can take out a loan for $1,000 and they charge you, let's pretend 5% for the sake of easy math, right? You would be like, well, that's okay, right? But then what are you going to do with that money? If you go and put that money in a savings account, you're going to get 1%. So you're losing 4%. Not a good investment, right? But let's say you can find this thing and give you 10%. Then that's a good debt to have. You don't have any money. You can go get $1,000 worth of debt. They're going to charge you 5%, but you're in something that on average is going to give you 10%. Then that's a good sound investment. It's a calculated risk. Something big as like a global downturn in the market could happen, and you could get screwed. It's very true, but it's a calculated risk, and you've done your homework, and then you can move forward. When you are young, the great thing about being young is that it doesn't matter if you screw it all up. You're young. What, like, you're gonna declare bankruptcy, the worst case scenario, and then you have to start all over. You'd be surprised at how many people who are successful financially have declared bankruptcy, because it's a thing you can do when you're young and not have to worry about the repercussions. You don't have a house, you don't have all these major assets that's going to ruin you, and so
Well,
you
don't worry. Our generation still won't have any of them. But
that's a different story. But my point being is, when you're young, you should be fearless, and being fearless, don't be reckless. But the power of compound interest is something I speak about because it's
Oh,
one of the biggest and strongest things, and we have to completely, I think, respect it and use it to our advantage. And that means early on. When you're 20, you're making X amount of investment. When you're 30, you're gonna probably have to do double the investment to have the same amount of money when you retire. When you're 40, you're probably gonna have to do triple that investment.
yep.
Right? So just imagine if you're investing, just for the sake of being easy, $1,000 when you're every month when you're 20, you're gonna have upwards of $1 million when you retire when you're 70, right? But if you only
Yep.
in your 30s, if you start saving up, you're going to be saving, maybe $2,000 a month. or more, and then you're going to just get to the same level. I mean, I'm trying to do the math quickly in my head, but when you're 40, damn, you're going to be making like maybe 5,000, 6,000, right? To your 30s, probably like maybe up to, it depends, but up to 3,000 if you're trying to
Yeah, I
reach
mean,
it. But my point being is you just have to invest so much more when if you just start
true.
early, compound interest works in your favor. And just, to clarify, compound interest is just the money you make off your initial investment making money for you. It eventually gets so big that it super surpasses your initial investment and just makes money. It's part of the reason why the wealthy, like people like Bill Gates, they can't spend the money. They could spend $1 million a second and they wouldn't actually spend it because they're making so much
It's
money
yep.
from their money. And that's what you want to get to. You want to get to where if you do nothing, your money just keeps making you money. And that's the idea.
Yeah. And then and I'm glad. I think that's a good segue to the next one is the percentages of allotment of money and how to manage it, right? And if you and we're talking about like imagine you talked about percentages. I thought that was definitely a nice way of looking at it. Is you break down your income into a group of percentages and say, yeah, this is because I as having a significant amount of student loans, I've been in that mental trap where you try to save up and then you just all your savings just get written off in a check to get pay down the principal, right? And I've lived that lifestyle. When I was in Nairobi, I lived that to a certain extent as well. After a master's degree, I ended up doing that again. I'm still doing that. Probably will continue doing that for another 4 or 5 years because life screwed me over there in the middle for a couple of years. So that didn't help. But but I understand the setup. Like it's very easy to quickly fall into the trap where you're just saving money only to put it into the dumpster fire that is the loan payment. And then I quickly realized at some point is that it doesn't make sense to not live your life. You cannot say I'm going to buy this tomorrow or I'm going to buy this when I'm loan free, because guess what? You're never going to be loan free, because the minute I finish paying off my student loan, I'm going to look to buy a house, or I'm going to look. So like you're always going to have something to pay off, and if you have nothing to pay off, you're probably not living life. So that's kind of where I was like, okay, if you need to be disciplined enough to manage certain amount of percentages, and say for instance you fall off for whatever reason, you maybe you don't make for a couple of months, something unexpected happened, you can't keep your percentages. How do you keep that like how do you keep that spirit up? How do you get back into the percentage mindset after you've experienced maybe one shock or two shock? Like essentially, how do you not relapse back?
Mm. I would say this comes down again to personal and creating a system that works for you. A lot of my videos kind of come down to that, whether it's money, whether it's emotion, whether it's just, you know, getting your butt out of bed. It's really about what gets you out of bed. What gets me out of bed is not going to be the same thing that gets you out of bed. And what gets me to be financially strict with myself is not the same thing that's going to get you to be financially strict with yourself. What I would say is just have the information. So many times we just don't even know what the heck we're talking about, because we're like, yeah, I could save if I wanted. I could probably save $100 a month, and they have no idea how much they're paying. And so the whole percentage thing is an exercise to help you get in tune with what you're really doing. I want people to know this is how much I'm making. This is how much I have to pay off the loans. This is how long it's going to take me to pay off those loans, assuming I keep paying that percentage. This is how much, my coffee every day ends up costing me as a percentage of
Yep,
my
I've
income.
done. I've actually done that.
So these are very important things that you should be doing. So you just look again, if you want to spend freaking 20% of your income on coffee, fine, do it, but do it knowingly. Don't at the end of the month be like, where did all my money go? I'm poor. I can't believe it. I make so much money. How is that possible? Or
Yeah,
whatever the
that
thing
never
is.
happens to me though. But yes, I
But
could.
that's the main thing I want to get. And again, not to be insensitive, I really am not talking about rent. I'm not talking about bills, utility
Yeah.
bills in that sense. Again, I will say that when I was younger, we lived in places that weren't great, and we lived in areas that weren't great either. But we knowingly make the decisions because I try to keep my percentile in order. From when I left college, I was like, what is a good percentile for me to be able to save? And I wanted to save 2/3 of my income. That was very high, but I knew I wanted to
Yeah, man.
pursue, a master's degree, a business degree, and I knew it was going to cost me a lot. And so, from a very young age, knowing what your costs are going to be, being able to save for them instead of having to take a loan is extremely empowering. But that meant we never went out to eat. ever. We never even ordered in. We always ate, what was cheap at the grocery store and it was on sale. And we ate relatively healthy, in the sense of like if the carrots are on sale, we bought a ton of carrots and we're making like, carrot everything, right? It's the same thing. You can do things in which you can fulfill what you want. And the most important thing here is to know your priority list. If your priority is to save money, if your priority is to pay off your debt, everyone's different, right? My priority was to make sure I saved that percentage for savings. And I was in a position where I was extremely lucky where my fellowships and my scholarships paid for my education. And so I didn't have to worry about, debt in that sense because I worked really hard to secure lots of scholarships. I to the point in my first year in college, I had gotten, I don't know, well over 40 scholarships, all about $1,000 to make up my tuition for the first year. I was extremely fortunate at the end to then get a fellowship that paid all of it, and then
Yeah, that's a lot of
I didn't
hustle
need it.
otherwise.
Yeah, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot, but that's the thing in life. It's work and like in money with investment, everything. You got to put in the time, you got to put in the work. And that's why I say, try to figure out how you can do it so that it entices you to have fun. But in reference to falling off, if you create a system you believe in, you're going to make mistakes, but you're going to pick yourself up. It's like, if you, I don't know, if you play a sport, if you like to skateboard, if you like to bike on the weekends and you're going to fall, if you're confident and you love what you're doing, you're going to get back up and you're going to ideally learn from it so it doesn't happen again. But you're going to get back in the bike. You're going to get back on the skateboard. You're going to get back into that sport because you like it, you practice, you have confidence in your skill and your ability, and you know that, bad things happen in life and it's a fluke. So you can get back on. If you're having fundamental doubts of your system, that's where the problem lies. If you're doing that, then I would say address those head on. Stop denying them and trying to run away from them. Deal with them. And if you feel really lost when it comes to mutual funds, then just spend some time in studying them. And if that scares you, it could be a simple look. I'm going to just read about mutual funds for half an hour. At the end of it, whatever I know is going to have to be good enough for me to decide whether I want to invest in it or not. And that's that. And you just move on, right? Do it to where you feel comfortable. Now, if you like numbers and you like, you find it interesting, do it for an hour. If that seems scary for you, I would say maybe do it for 15 minutes. But figure out where you feel comfortable and then get used to the system and incorporate it. And it goes the same way for percentages. My main goal in studying that exercise percentage is trying to get people to figure out how much are they spending, where are they spending it, so they make conscious decisions about their money and their finance. If you fail at that point, figure out why you're failing. And sometimes you're just like, yeah, I failed there, but I'm happy with that. That's a failure I consciously made, and this was a bad month, but I'll get better. But what you don't want to be like, what just happened? I don't understand
Yeah.
this is going to
Yeah.
happen. But those are two different pictures. And I think if you do it right, you're not going to have the latter. You're going to have the prior, and that's you're gonna have confidence in yourself to just get back on the saddle and continue going.